Um, can you all hear me? Can you hear me, Nia? Can you confirm? Okay, cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Good. Could you change the slide? Here we go. Yeah, so all of you already know Siegwerk, but I'm not sure how much. We are a global leader in producing printing inks and coatings for the packaging industry. And we are 100% family owned. And the family and our management really want to do a business with the next generation in mind. So really be sustainable in every way. We are old. We're founded in 1824, so quite a long history. And there you see two of the pictures. That was um, there you see a picture of our plant, how it was more than 100 years ago, close to so in Siegburg now, close to Cologne in Germany. However, the world has changed quite a bit, and we have changed with it. Now we're present in 35 countries, and we're delivering worldwide, I would say. We see ourselves a little bit as an enabler for sustainable packaging. Packaging is needed worldwide to preserve food and other things. But especially with our coatings and inks, we can make these packagings reusable, um, um, and recyclable and many other things. It's quite a complex topic. Also, we drive automation very much and also digital processes. So this is our look into the future. And then we thought, so how do we get sustainable into all of our operations and incorporate everything? So in 2025, in June, we've launched our supplier sustainability program, which we call Sustain Up. Next slide. And here we have a very clear vision. We said we want to drive a sustainable business, and sustainable products start with sustainable procurement. We've given ourselves quite ambitious targets to achieve this and also to give us a focus. So one of the topics is to reduce high-risk suppliers by 95% by 2030, and also to reduce our emissions from purchased goods by 25% by 2030, and then become net zero by latest 2050. This is science-based, target approved. How do we want to achieve that? The importance for us is transparency and action. So only if we know what's going on, if we have the data, if we have the information, if we collaborate with you, we can actually decide on what to do and then actually do it. So next slide. This webinar is about grievance mechanism. So how does it fit into that picture? So a grievance mechanism, first and foremost, it helps us to early identify issues. Human rights, environmental issues, ethics, compliance. The earlier you know about an issue, the earlier you can do something about it. You prevent disruptions, you prevent cost. But also, if employees can openly address issues and they know they're taken care of, they feel valued, and that usually leads to a higher productivity and an employee retention. And we do have lots of employees, me myself, same, to stay for a very long time with the company. Looking a little bit more globally, a grievance mechanism that is working and transparent also builds trust and transparency. I've mentioned our employees, but also with your suppliers and business partners, with customers, but also with government agency, because it shows that we're really committed to responsible business practices. And last but not least, it is in many markets a legal compliance. And I will go into the German one in the next slides, that you have a grievance mechanism. So it reduces your risks for fines, sanctions, or in some markets, even that you might be excluded from public tenders. Can you change the slide to the next one? So a little bit of a deep dive into the law, and I try not to be too boring about it. In Germany, we have a law that's called the German Supply Chain Due Diligence Law, and this is quite advanced in the world. that in big companies in Germany have to look into their supply chain and into their own operations in ensuring to be compliant with human rights standards globally and with environmental protection. Just in short, I might mention it, it's called the LKSG. So we Germans have very long names for everything. In short, it's LKSG. But what does it require for grievance mechanisms? So the first and foremost is that you need to offer one. Yeah, there needs to be one. It needs to be transparent, accessible for everyone, and open for human rights and environmental issues. Often it's also called a whistleblower tool. So also for other things can be used like ethics issues, topics like that. It needs to be applicable and apply to your own operations, so internally, but also to your suppliers, so externally, also for communities, general access. And it is very important that if someone addresses a grievance, that it is confidential and that it ensures that there's no retaliation. So how do we do that? And you see that on the next slide. So we do have this kind of whistleblower tool online in our intranet and in the internet. So globally accessible, where you can report the misconduct. So this is, let's say, the basic thing, but also many grievances are still being reported with colleagues and others, because we're human. If you have an issue, you want to talk to someone. And I think this is very, very important to have a local support structure, and we do. So in each of our entities, the local resource managers are trained to receive grievances and know how to deal it, who to involve, and of course ensure complete confidentiality. We also have in all sites either a works council people can address their issues to, or workers delegates trained on the processes. And of course, depending on the issue, everyone can go to the immediate supervisor, who will then initiate the grievance mechanism. And I must say this is working relatively well and really increasing the trust in the company. Can you change the slide, Nia? Good. So, but there's more requirements for the LKSG. So first thing, publicly communicated and regularly reviewed. I already mentioned it's in the intranet, it's in the internet, and we do have a human rights policy where we also have a link that's publicly available, and we have the business partner code of conduct where there's also a link, and where we're also giving a QR code which can easily be used to put on the wall somewhere, so that each person with their cell phone can easily access it. Next one. So the next thing is, okay, now we know what's going on, but what do we do about it? Yeah, so it is required by the law that they need to be investigated quickly. So don't hold on for 2 or 3 years to it, but really immediate. And that also corrective actions are taken and documented. For this, we've implemented global and local procedures, depending a bit on where you are, but every HR person is clear what I need to do and what steps do I need to initiate. Next one here. And so this was all about the one grievance that's coming in, but you also need to aggregate on the complaints that are coming in to get, let's say, an overview what is happening. Now, so only when you, for example, when you see, okay, in a certain entity, there are more issues concerning discrimination, in others environmental, that you see tendencies and can regularly analyze them and then initiate improvements. For this, we have a global compliance circle where the grievances are reported and discussed, and also part of the LKSG requirements. We had a very thorough human rights risk assessment in our organization, and as part of this also included grievances from different areas to be highlighted again, and then to be shown in the compliance circle and taking initiative for improvements. So this is what we do. And I'm sure we can also still learn quite a lot from you, Niha. So I'm looking forward to the presentation.
Thank you, Kathleen, and thank you for illustrating the way that Siegwerk is undertaking its grievance redressal mechanism. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions, so please do share them in the box. And now let's move on to the keynote speaker. Pradeepan, a very warm welcome to you, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about CiviDep and then dive straight into the topic. Thanks. Over to you.
Uh, Thank you. Thanks a lot, Neha. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. It is really wonderful to be here today, and a big thanks to Center for Responsible Business and to Neha for inviting me as a keynote speaker. I work for an organization called CiviDep. It's an NGO working on workers' rights and corporate accountability. And we focus on sectors part of global value chains such as garments, footwear, electronics, and plantations. We focus on responsible business conduct of companies. We work in the space of business and human rights. And we also work with workers on the ground, building their capacity, training them on their rights and entitlements. In my work, I have also collaborated with businesses in the footwear and garment chains, helping them with supply chain mapping, improving situation of home workers, helping them increase transparency in the supply chains and so on. So this is a very relevant topic, grievance redressal systems. In recent years, we have heard a lot about concepts like human rights due diligence, meaningful stakeholder engagement, and sustainability reporting, and so on. In Europe, there are new laws on due diligence, such as CSDDD, and what Kathleen mentioned about the German Supply Chain Act, and so on. And in India too, there are new mechanisms such as BRSR. I'm sure many of you here are already familiar with BRSR or have used similar sustainability reporting formats in your companies. These are, however, important steps forward, but one key part is sometimes forgotten or often overlooked, which is access to remedy. Under the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, access to remedy is the third pillar. I'm sure you will hear more about this from Neha further in the session today. It simply means that when there is a grievance or issue, people, especially workers, have a fair and safe way to raise it and get it resolved. While due diligence helps prevent harm, access to remedy ensures that when harm or violations occurs, it is always addressed. Without both, our systems remain only on paper. Brought together, both due diligence and access to remedy could create workplaces that workers can trust and use. So today I want to talk about why grievance redressal is critical for both workers and businesses, the challenges we face in having a functional grievance system, and how it can actually make life easier for companies in the long run. I was told by Neha that today we'll be having representatives from companies that work with chemicals. The organization I work for, Cividup, is also working with workers in garment and leather sectors where chemicals are used. So, in such workplaces, grievance systems are not just about compliance, they are essential for safety, stability, and overall performance. I hope everyone would agree to that. Chemical manufacturing involves complex processes, there are hazards, and a workforce that includes permanent, contract, and sometimes migrant workers. I mean, this is the reality today. Here, concerns such as unsafe handling of chemicals, excessive working hours, or harassments can grow into bigger issues like accidents, may cause reputational damage to the companies, or cause production disruptions if it is not addressed early. So, a robust and a functional grievance system is not just compliance issue, it's also an early warning system. I think this is something that Kathleen also mentioned in her presentation. Such grievance systems help companies resolve issues before they escalate into bigger issues, and it benefits workers too. When employees can safely raise issues and see them resolved, it restores dignity, fairness, and trust for them. And they also, in the process, feel valued, respected, and more committed to their work. So, in short, I would say grievance redressal is good for workers and it is also smart for businesses. And overall, it is a win-win for both workers and the companies. But we also need to acknowledge about the pressures that manufacturers and suppliers face today. We also work with companies that are part of global value chains, and we are aware of the requirements around social and environmental audits and the pressure that causes to the suppliers. Many companies have to focus heavily on compliance and audits, spending enormous time and a lot of money preparing for inspections, responding to questionnaires, and tracking the paperwork. Unfortunately, audits often work as tick box exercises rather than solving real life problems. Ultimately, we know this leads to a lot of audit fatigue, both for workers and managers. Frequent inspections are stressful and takes time away from production or in building real systems that actually work. And a huge amount of resources in the form of time, money, and effort are diverted to reporting, which sometimes does not lead to meaningful change on the ground. So the good news is a kind of a functional grievance system that responds to the issues, addresses many of these problems in the long term. And when you have kind of trusted channels for workers to raise concerns, these issues get resolved early, reducing the number of violations that could be found in audits later. Fewer repeated problems mean less pressure on managers, less stress, and less audit fatigue. And it creates a culture of continuous improvement and not just audit readiness. In short, strong grievance systems saves time, resources, and stress while naturally improving safety and compliance. At Cividup, we see this on the ground every day. We work with workers across industries such as garments and electronics, and we often see grievance systems that exist on paper but not on practice. Workers frequently say they don't know the system exists, don't believe compliance will be addressed, or they fear retaliation if they speak up. Contract and temporary workers who are not directly employed by companies are particularly vulnerable, and they may face issues such as wage delays, unsafe conditions, or harassment, and may not always have avenues to raise concerns. So the challenge is not just in creating systems; it's really there in making them trusted and usable in the long run. So common barriers to grievance redressal include lack of awareness among workers about the systems. There could be language or literacy issues, as we migrant workers in most cases may not know the local language. There might be fear of retaliation. There could be social stigma around issues such as sexual harassment. Workers may not always be open about issues like such sexual abuse, and a fragmented workforce where contract and migrant workers are excluded could also be a big barrier in achieving in having a working grievance system. But all these challenges can be addressed with proper design, leadership, and consistent effort. We have also seen in good practices that work. I'm sure you will see that examples in the coming presentations. That successful grievance systems often provide not just one reporting channel, but multiple channels. This may be in the form of hotlines, internet-based systems, suggestion boxes, or even functional statutory committees, all in local languages. We have different forms of grievance systems. We call them judicial systems, which are required by the companies to be no, set up under the law, like statutory committees, for example. There could be non-judicial systems, one offered by third parties like multi-stakeholder initiatives. It could be in the form of hotlines or numbers that workers can call anonymously and report grievances. So a kind of a combination of such mechanisms will work in most cases rather than just providing one. Then supporting collective and represented voices, ensuring group complaints. This is especially important because individual workers often don't have the confidence and strength to raise grievances. And if the companies encourage them to raise grievances collectively, there might be more probability of workers coming up and raising issues. Confidential reporting, especially for issues, sensitive issues like sexual harassment or safety issues, is very essential. And partnerships that companies can forge with local NGOs, workers and people that workers trust, workers collective, women's groups, also build credibility, gives credibility to the process. Transparent follow-up may be useful to show that the system is real and is linking grievances to safety and performance, helps prevent future risks. Leadership commitment is critical here. When managers and supervisors openly support and encourage use of grievance mechanisms, workers in turn would feel safe to speak up. The company leadership so should openly encourage workers to use formal channels than informal ones like just reporting issues to supervisors, which we commonly see on shop floors. So, an environment for sustained dialogue can also be created by reviving workplace committees, providing a structured space where workers and management can regularly discuss issues and solutions together. We at Cividup also have developed some modules for companies how to revitalize the workplace statutory committees. You can also refer that. Practical steps for companies are always straightforward, co-creating systems with workers so that there is ownership and trust, including all types of workers and their representatives without discriminating against any sort of workers, be it migrant workers, female workers. Giving access to all of them is quite important. Protection against any retaliation, training managers in listening and problem solving, and monitoring the effectiveness and use grievances to improve policies, safety, and workflow. All these steps can help workers repose faith in the system and make it working. Overall, we should believe, I mean, a system that reports grievances is always a working one. So the company should not feel that having zero complaints mean it signals something good about the company. So that is kind of the cultural shift that should happen in the mindset. Grievance redressal is ultimately about trust and fairness. For workers, it means dignity, safety, and being heard. And for businesses, it means fewer risks, better safety, reduced audit pressure, and stronger and engaged workforce. That is what meaningful due diligence also looks like, where workers are protected, business is stronger, and workplaces are fair and safe. I do hope this webinar helps you take this idea to the next step, to build systems that are trusted, functional, and fair. And I stop here, and I wish you all the best for the rest of the session. Thank you. I hope this was useful.
Extremely, Pradeepan. At least you've made my presentation and my life easier. I really appreciate the way you and Catherine have set the context today. And there were a few bites that I mean, I note them down. One was how grievance redressal mechanisms actually is making life easier for workers as well as businesses. So it is an opportunity. And also the trust in systems. It's not just about developing systems, but also, building trust and communicating them to the most vulnerable groups as well. So thank you so much. I understand that you are pressed for time. We would love to have you for the remaining webinar, but I understand since you're pressed and in case you need to log out, that's absolutely fine. And with this now, let's move on to the next segment, which is a little more of a deep dive on grievance redressal mechanisms. So I hope my screen is visible and the audio is also clear. I think some of the participants were having some audio related issues. I hope that has been cleared. So the way, Rishika, are the slides changing?
Yeah, we can see
Okay.
your changing slides.
Okay, great. So the way we have structured this presentation is really to keep it basic right now, but also to give you a very good flavor in terms of what is grievance redressal mechanisms, what is the process, what is the governance structure, what are some of the legal provisions, international standards as well, and ultimately end with good practices. So this is something that we actually picked from the previous webinars because I recall there were a lot of questions around illustrations, examples. You wanted more of practices from existing companies. So that's what we've done in the end. We've brought you some examples from existing practices, specifically in the chemical sector. So let's begin with what is a grievance. So sorry, just give me a minute. So sorry about that. So what is a grievance? In the previous webinar, we spoke about business and human rights. We specifically spoke about what is the ambit, what are the kind of human rights, and how it relates to businesses. And here, when we talk about grievance, what we mean is when is that when that situation arises where there is a perceived injustice or adverse impact experienced by individuals or groups due to the company's action. So here individuals and group is important. Pradeepan was also mentioning that sometimes it's possible that one person may not feel comfortable to come and file a grievance. So that's why we should allow groups as well. So this is essentially what a grievance means. And if you talk about the legal framework from where it arises, so we look, it can be couched in, of course, the legal provisions. It could be from contractual provisions, promised, customary, or fairness related grounds. Within communities or individuals, and these have all been defined in local laws as well as global regulation. So in local laws, what we mean is the fundamental rights, which is couched in the Constitution of India, directive principles, as well as your labor codes. And finally, the global standards. Here we mean ILO, the United Nations Guiding Principles. And there are also frameworks, for instance, the UN Global Compact or Fair and Labor Association. So some of these we will touch on a bit later. But essentially what a grievance means is a perceived injustice or adverse impact experienced, very importantly, due to a company's action. So now just to give you an example on what could be some of the types of grievances. Grievances are also sometimes synonymously used with complaints, the word complaint. So the if you look at the right side of the slide, all of these are the human rights. This is not an indicative, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just an indicative list. So here are some of the examples of human rights, and a grievance would typically be a perceived injustice of one of these rights. So for example, it could be discrimination, harassment, it could be wage or benefits related, it could be working conditions in terms of maybe heat. Heat stress is becoming a very important issue, specifically in the construction sector, for example. And then also interpersonal conflicts. So if at all there are issues within the workers or within the management and workers, or policy or procedure related as well. So these are just some types of grievances to give you a little bit of an example. Now, here's a poll. This is also connected to the previous webinar, since we spoke about some of the business and human rights examples. So the question that we would like for you to answer is environmental contamination arising out of business operations a grievance? We'll give it a minute or so, and then you can type in your responses, and we'll publish the poll. Okay, so we have about 18 of you who have said yes, that environmental contamination arising out of business operations is a grievance, while 3 of you have said no. I was actually seeing the number go up on no, and I was hoping it would stop, and it did stop at 3. So environment is a human right. Everybody has a human right to clean environment. This is under the fundamental rights in the Indian Constitution. This is also prevalent in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So it's a global as well as nationally recognized human right. So environmental contamination arising out of business is a very, very valid grievance. So that is your answer. But there are some more questions coming ahead. So we hope that you will continue to respond on that. And of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A box. We will be responding to that as well. So now we've understood what grievances are. Let's jump into grievance redressal mechanisms. What are these? So, as the name suggests, it is a structured process to address concerns related to human rights impacts from business activities and to seek remedies. So essentially, it is a process, a structured process, where a group of individuals or individuals can come and seek redressal to their grievances. Generally, when it comes to companies, the way they should structure the mechanisms, it should complement national as well as international laws, regulations, and standards. We will be talking a little bit more about what are the national and international standards, because India has very clear provisions on grievance redressal mechanisms in the labor codes, and in the international standards also see there's some very, very clearly specified frameworks. So we'll touch a little bit more on that later into this presentation. Also, just a trivia, the Business Responsibility and Sustainability Framework, the BRSR, which I'm sure a lot of you are already filing. In that, disclosure number 5 is business and human rights. And in that, there is a question on, do you have a grievance redressal mechanism in place? And it also asks how many grievances, or rather how many complaints you have received in that financial year, and you have to juxtapose it with how many complaints have you disposed. So interestingly, CRB was part of formulating the BRSR with the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, and that time we had a lot of consultations with businesses as well. And there were concerns around, if we put out information on how many grievances we are receiving, that may throw a negative light on our business. It may negatively impact our business reputation, right? But the response from the ministry was very clear that it actually shows that you have clear systems. It shows that people trust the systems, they're using these systems. What is more important is how are you dispersing these grievances? How are you addressing these, and how efficiently are you dispersing these within specific timelines? So that's on grievance redressal mechanisms. If you look at what should some of the key characteristics be, these are mentioned in the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. So what they say is, one, they should be legitimate. Two, they should be accessible. What we mean is that your stakeholders should be able to reach out to these tools. They should be able to use these tools. So, for instance, language should not be a barrier, or basically nothing should be a barrier. It should be accessible to your stakeholders. Third, and very important, it should be predictable. Your employees, your workers should know that, okay, this is the process, this is the escalation in the company, and it is within these many days that we should be receiving our feedback, or the result of the grievance that they have raised. Fourth, it should be equitable. So we can have different mechanisms, but we cannot prioritize. So we cannot have a special program, or let's say a faster one for employees and a slower one for, let's say, contractual workers. So it should be equitable. Everyone should be able to make use of these platforms. And transparent, this is something that both Kathleen and Pradeepan mentioned in their talking points earlier. These should be transparent and well documented as well. Rights compatible, what we mean by rights compatible is that human rights compatible. So they should take into consideration the local laws, international laws, and they should also take into consideration who is your most vulnerable stakeholder. Again, Pradeepan mentioned this, for instance, women. So you do have a grievance redressal mechanism accessible for all, but can you make it a little more accessible for women, or look at your even more vulnerable groups, for instance, maybe migrant workers? Can you make it a little more accessible for them? And finally, like in every other aspect of responsible business, it should be a continuous source of learning. So once you do develop your grievance redressal mechanism, you should ensure that you are reviewing this at a regular within regular periods of time, and documenting it and tightening the process as you move ahead. We have another interesting question here in terms of the key, since we were talking about key characteristics, do you think that confidentiality is an important principle of effective grievance redressal mechanisms? And again, we'll leave you with about a minute or two to answer this. Can we publish the results, please? Okay, I think I've scared the people who were answering no in their questions earlier, but this is also, if you've answered no, I'm sorry, but this is also a wrong answer. Confidentiality is extremely important, and what we mean here is confidentiality when it comes to the individual or the group that has raised the complaint. So, for instance, in our organization also, we have a grievance redressal cell. Here, if somebody raises a complaint, you are supposed to ensure confidentiality. What arises out of that grievance, even the outcome, is completely confidential. You can disclose how many complaints were raised. You can even internally share in your meetings how many complaints were raised, how many were disposed. However, who raised the complaint is an absolute no-no. So confidentiality is extremely important. Let's move ahead now. Let's get into the mechanisms now. When we look at grievance redressal mechanism, what should a governance structure look like? Again, this is indicative. This is collated from global standards, Indian frameworks, and some of the good practices that we found in your companies, rather. However, again, this is indicative. Of course, there is a lot of room for improvement, but these are some of the milestones, you can say, or the touch points that definitely should be part of your governance structure. So first, definitely have a robust policy. The policy should very clearly indicate that what are the objectives of the policy, what is the scope. By scope, we also mean who all can raise complaints within your grievance redressal policy. And third, very importantly, align it. Check that if it's well aligned with your national and global expectations. So have very clear policy which touches on, rather underlines very clearly what is the objective, what is the scope, and it aligns with the national as well as global expectations. Of course, you support the policy with robust processes as well. And here, the next 3 points are something that direct towards these processes. So we have the grievance handling roles and responsibilities. So once you have created the framework, what you need to do is define whose responsibility is, have designated officers, create a committee, have an oversight committee as well. This could be a hierarchical setup. This could be a one-person job. This could be a your immediate superior manager. This is a room where the businesses can take their own understanding and decide who should be responsible for these grievances. So identify these people, create these committees, and build their capacity. I liked what Kathleen mentioned in her opening remarks. She mentioned that their local resource manager is trained periodically on grievance redressal mechanisms. So that becomes very important. So you identify them and then you train them as well periodically on how to effectively handle their roles and responsibilities. And lastly, very important, accessibility, that these managers or these designated officers should be accessible. There are, I see them on memes on Instagram that the HR is always missing. So that should definitely not happen. The grievance handler should always be accessible for its stakeholders. Finally, structured escalation mechanisms. It is possible that the immediate supervisor or the designated officer is unable to resolve these complaints. Something maybe if it is of a more serious nature, or it is, let's say, it demands more time. So there should be a very clear escalation process. This should be two-way. One, at the level of the designated officer, where they feel that they may not have the capacity, or they feel that this is something serious and it needs attention of more, let's say, more senior level of officials. So one, it should be at that level. But second, also at the level of the individual or the group that is raising the grievance. So if they are not getting a redressal in time as expected, if it is not transparent, if it is inaccessible, so they also at their level should have a very clear understanding of how and effectively with whom they can escalate their grievances. And the final point, system tracking and monitoring. This is really important to understand the root cause. That firstly, if you have a robust grievance mechanism, you will already have a very good overview of what are the risks within the business, what are the negative impact areas. So you can already start treating these areas. Along with redressing the complaints, you can start really dealing with the root cause of why these complaints are coming in. And finally, with the root cause analysis, you look at corrective actions as well. That going forward, how can you tighten your entire system and how can you improve the entire wheel of grievance redressal mechanism? I'll take you through the process. Again, this is an overview. Not all processes have to be like this. Like Pradeepan was mentioning, you should not have just one grievance redressal mechanism, but you should have multiple grievance redressal mechanisms. So all of them may have a slightly different process. Again, this is best suited for the company to decide on how do they want to architect the entire framework. But just to give you an overview, what should happen? So first, of course, the uptake where the designated officer receives the complaint. This can be through different channels. It can be a public complaint as well. It could be, of course, the company defines who all should be able to raise complaints. So once it comes in, you document that. The second step is redressal. So you acknowledge that you have received this complaint. You document it well, and then you attach it a unique tracking number so that even I mean, as further complaints come in, you can if at all it is required, you can quickly track it as to where the complaint is. Third is review and investigation, where let's say you forward the complaint to the complainee. So whoever has let's say if somebody has complained against their health and safety manager, so you basically forward this complaint to the health and safety manager and tell them that it is within this period of time that they should be responding to it. Finally, when you get a response from them, you review what the resolution time has been. You see how best you can close this, and ultimately you provide the feedback. So you give the response to the person or the individual who has complained. We spoke a little bit about the governance structure. I just want to go back to one point, that while you're developing this structure, dedicated budget and resource is extremely important. We spoke about resource, but a dedicated budget is equally important because it's an ongoing process. So as you continue tightening the process, the budget, a clear budgetary allocations and human resource plays a very, very important role. Now, these are two trick questions, and let's see how many say no or rather disagree with these ones. So we have two trick questions. One is grievance redressal mechanisms are only for companies' employees and not contractual workers. Let's see what most of you have to say for this. I think most of them have shared their answers. Maybe we can share the result, publish the result. And I could see Rishika smiling through the responses as well. This is 95% of you have disagreed with this statement. The statement is grievance redressal mechanism is only for companies' employees, not contractual workers. This is actually a statement where we should all agree. We should agree with this statement because grievance redressal mechanisms, especially the way they have been defined in international frameworks and the United Nations guiding principles, and also to some extent to our labor code, specify that various stakeholders should be allowed to access your grievance redressal mechanism. So it includes your employees as well as your contractual workers. So I hope that I hope that this stays with you, because this is a pivotal point for grievance mechanism. If you want it to be effective, it should not just extend to your employees, but also your contractual workers, including even perhaps migrant workers. So it goes to all of your employees plus workers. If you have questions, I see that right now there aren't many, but we will shortly look at the Q&A box. So if you have any questions arising out of this, please feel free to drop in. We'll touch on that just in a little while. Okay, so continuing with this in this series, the next question is, grievance redressal mechanisms are only for employees and contractual workers, not suppliers. Let's see how you respond to this. I'll give you a small hint. Kathleen had indicated something about around this in her keynote address, in her opening remarks, sorry. I can give you one more hint, though I feel most of you have already shared your responses, that there was a law that she mentioned, the German supply chain law, which mentioned who all can reach out to these grievance redressal mechanisms. Okay, maybe we can end the poll and share the results. Okay, this is also a very, very important point, and that's why I was trying to be very economic with my words in the last question. Grievance redressal mechanisms is for all of your stakeholders, so it includes suppliers. Suppliers can also file their complaints in a grievance redressal mechanism. So you heard Kathleen in her opening remarks. She mentioned that under the German Supply Chain Act, when they are developing their grievance redressal mechanisms, they have to ensure that it is for their value chain. So if at all a supplier has issues, they can file complaints in their in the buyers, or rather in their clients' redressal mechanisms as well. In fact, from what I know, and Kathleen, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think that the German Supply Chain Act even allows workers of in the supply chain to file a complaint in Germany, in the German courts, through the NGOs, through their local NGOs. So grievance redressal mechanism is it's something that you define your stakeholders, but you look at the rights holders, you look at your stakeholders, and it should definitely be open to all. Yes, Kathleen.
Yeah, so just to two different, the one is the grievance mechanism, which is then posted to the company, and that has to, which could be a work of our suppliers posted in our grievance mechanism. So we would find it and then would work with our supplier to make a change. That's one thing. The other one is quite a complex process, how to really go to the courts if there's serious issues. And to be honest, there's also regular changes. So there are possibilities, but I'm really not the legal expert. But the thing that I can say is that if there is serious human rights or environmental issues, most countries already have laws in place where these can be addressed through the judicial system. So it's not limited to Germany, but of course it's different country by country what can be done. But there's several countries where this in general can be done. And doing that through an NGO, of course, totally makes sense because a single worker doesn't have the resources to do these kind of things.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. So an important takeaway from the last two slides for all of you is that a grievance redressal mechanism is to be designed in a way that you can receive complaints, you can receive grievances from your workers, employees, contractual workers, local communities, suppliers, your subcontractors, vendors, trade unions, and even consumers. So you develop your grievances in such a way that it is accessible to all of these stakeholders specifically. I had one more trick question, but I promise this is the last one. Here is the question that I have an active and responsive POSH committee. You know, the POSH committee is Prevention of Sexual Harassment Committee under the law. So if I have a POSH committee, I do not need additional grievance redressal mechanisms. Do we agree with this statement or do we disagree? I see a little bit of movement. A few of you are jumping into the agree boat. Okay, so let's end the poll and publish the results. I have an active and responsive POSH committee. I do not need additional grievance redressal mechanisms. Most of you have answered disagree, and that is absolutely right. So we discussed this, I think, in the second or third slide, that what are the types of complaints. So keep in mind the human rights, keep in mind business and human rights. Any grievance arising out of any human right can be addressed to a grievance redressal mechanism. So while POSH specifically deals with sexual harassment, complaints such as wage or related to environment or safety, health, they're all valid complaints. So you do need to have mechanisms where such complaints can also be raised. So let's move ahead now. Maybe before we move ahead, we could take some question and answers. Let's make this a little interactive. Let's see if there are any Q&As already. So no questions yet. Either I'm delivering this webinar too well or we're all in the Friday mood. I have a feeling it's the latter one. I see Darshan has asked, okay, great. Kathleen has already answered that. But maybe before going ahead, I could just do a quick recap. Grievance, when you think of a grievance, think of human rights and think of anything that could be for a group or an individual and a perceived injustice when it comes to human rights. In terms of key characteristics, what you need to understand is they should be accessible, they should be transparent, they should be they should be well documented. You should have a periodic review and analysis of your systems. You should be very clear with who can file these complaints. Remember the trick questions, that it's not just for employees. Grievance redressal mechanisms is for employees, for contractual workers. Contractual workers could be even your migrant workers. It is for consumers, for suppliers as well. And finally, in terms of systems, you need to have a very clear and robust policy, which very clearly spells out what the objective of the policy is and who can, the scope of the policy. So who can really use these mechanisms, and finally support them with strong processes. I'll just check the Q&A box once again. Okay, so no questions yet, but yeah, please feel free to drop in. your question. So let me now just walk you through, and I'll make this quick because I want to spend more time on the good practices, and I think you will actually enjoy listening to that more. So I'll maybe breeze through these two slides. So in terms of national provisions and international standards, why is grievance redressal mechanism important? So, firstly, in India, when we talk about national provisions, there is these have been defined in the Industrial Relations Code primarily. There is also the Prohibition and Redressal Act. Sorry, Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace Act. Um, these are, let's say, the key acts in which we have some of the grievances that have been very clearly fleshed out in the industrial code. There is the works committee. There is also the grievance redressal committee. Works committee is basically for an industrial establishment with 100 or more workers, whereas grievance redressal mechanism is for 20 or more workers. In terms of representation, the Works Committee should have equal representation of workers as well as employers. And when we look at Grievance Redressal Committee, it's basically what we just discussed, a platform to resolve the grievances that are arising out of the business operations. And finally, the purpose. So the Works Committee is basically to ensure that the balance is preserved between the employers and the workers. And when it comes to Grievance Redressal Committee, it is a more formal structure where you may have designated officer, you may have a designated committee. There should be a chairperson. So the grievance redressal committee, the grievance redressal committee, as explained or rather defined under the Industrial Relations Code, also says that there should be a chairperson, and this chairperson shall be selected from your employer and worker every year on a rotational basis. So again, this is more or less to ensure that there is balance and an amiable environment between your workers as well as employees. In terms of the POSH committee, I think this most of us are already well aware on. You have to have a POSH committee if you have employees of a strength of 10 or minimum 10. The committee will specifically look at sexual harassment complaints. They will conduct inquiries, they will collect evidence, and also provide recommendations of actions. In terms of how the committee is composed, it generally includes 2 female members, 1 external member, and 1 presiding officer. The presiding officer is generally of the company. In terms of international standards, most of grievance-related frameworks are very, very well explained in the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. We spoke a little bit about this in the first webinar, the previous webinar. So if you recall, it comprises of 3 pillars. Pillar 1 says that the states should it's the duty of the state to provide and protect human rights. Businesses should respect human rights, and the third pillar deals with access to remedy. So it is both the responsibility of state as well as businesses. It mentions the word responsibility, so it is the responsibility of state as well as businesses to ensure effective grievance redressal mechanisms. There are also some frameworks by Fair Labor, CVDEP, like Pradeepan was mentioning. There is the Danish Institute of Human Rights. So there are a lot of frameworks available in the global paradigm, which you can refer to. And there are a lot of guidelines available on how to develop your grievance redressal mechanisms. And coming to relevance. So this is something I think Pradeepan he demonstrated it really well. I thought he was very articulate in explaining why grievance redressal mechanisms are an opportunity. I think we can skip this poll. Okay, fine, it's there already. So maybe you could type in, but I think I've already given away the answer, but it would have been very disheartening if somebody would have written disagree. 100% agree. I am very happy with this response. So yes, it is an opportunity for improvement. Like Pradeepan was explaining that it essentially what it does it spotlights what are the areas where things may be going wrong. He mentioned I'd written it somewhere, basically fewer repeated problems. Yes, that was the quote that for me, it stood out, fewer repeated mistakes. So once you start understanding that this is an area of concern, you will ultimately look at corrective actions, which ultimately will ensure that you have fewer repeated mistakes. So grievance redressal mechanism should be looked at as an opportunity. It will definitely improve the employee worker satisfaction. It will increase efficiency and productivity. Overall, when you look at your business, it will enhance reputation and trust. It will also enhance international markets, since you know now that business and human rights is it is a concept which is being instilled in global value chain. So it's no more a concept of just the brand or just the supplier. It is a shouldered responsibility. And definitely when a company is demonstrating robust grievance redressal mechanisms, it will have a better reputation, which will ultimately lead to better access to international markets. So that is a little bit of a summary on why it's important. But of course, there were very, very important takeaways from Pradeepan's keynote, which I hope that they would stay with you. Now I'll come to this final slide because this is something that we worked on for quite some time. This took us some time, but I'm really happy with this. And I feel like you will enjoy this as well. And of course, if any questions come in, maybe I'll have a quick look at. Okay, no questions yet. Okay. So what we tried to do is we did a quick search, not quick actually, quite a detailed search, and it took us quite some time to look at what are the good practices specifically in the chemical industry. So what are companies in the chemical sector doing in India, the chemical companies in India, what are they doing when it comes to grievance redressal mechanisms? So Sun Pharmaceutical, what they have done is they have provided a very clear three-tiered system. So for their grievance, it's you can check on their website. It provides a very clear three-tiered system. So it first goes to your immediate supervisor, and then there's a midterm person and mid-level person, and then third is a proper committee that they have set up. And what it encourages, the process really is to resolve these complaints at the lowest level. And finally, what they have done is they have aligned their policy with the company's ethics policy. So it is, I mean, the grievance redressal mechanism has been couched in their overall company ethics policy. So it also reflects how clearly they have approached grievance redressal mechanisms, and also the fact that they have couched this in their ethics policy shows how serious they are about taking grievance redressal mechanisms. SFR Limited has mentioned that they have multilingual grievance channels. So this is also a very, very important point. We were talking about accessibility, that you different your since your stakeholder group is large, you're looking at migrant workers, you're looking at contractual workers, you're looking at employees as well as your management. So what you need to ensure is that, especially in India, that it is a multilingual platform. And finally, periodic training. So they do a lot of trainings for their employees as well as workers, as well as their management on their existing grievance redressal mechanism. Finally, Dr. Reddy's laboratory. This was, I'm sure a lot of companies are doing this as well, but what stood out for us was the fact that they're using tech. So they've created an online portal, and they're using tech to track their grievances. So since we spoke about how the entire system needs to be very closely monitored and reviewed, of course, each complaint has to be monitored and reviewed. So they're using tech and digitization to enable their grievance redressal mechanisms and to track their grievances. Coming to Naveen Fluorine International, what we saw was that they had very clearly spelled out that their grievance redressal mechanisms ensure confidentiality and transparency, and they undertake periodic reviews to assess gaps and solutions. So we discussed some of the key characteristics of grievance redressal mechanisms, the fact that they have underlined confidentiality and transparency, also underlying periodic reviews and assessment of gaps in solutions makes this a good practice. Um, Maybe before I come to Himachal, I'll go to Gujarat Alkalis. So it's Gujarat Alkalis and Chemical Limited, and what stood out for us was that they have very clearly communicated who can access their grievance redressal mechanisms and the timeline. So they say that their employees, their contractors, community members, the local community, and customers, they all can access their grievance redressal mechanisms. And in terms of timeline, they've given a very clear timeline of 15 to 30 days. Now, Himachal Pradesh Pharma Cluster. Why this was important was it is an example of associations coming together. So it's not just one business, it's a group of businesses that have come together to ensure that there is a harmony between the workers as well as the management. So I thought this was a very good example of grievance redressal mechanism at an association or rather a cluster level. So what they have is an open door policy for direct access to management. The emails have been shared, and it's a rather let's say a direct system in which people may reach out to the management, and they give a lot of focus and attention to documentation, which again gives a spotlight into what the risk areas are. So documentation and timely review of grievances. So that is on the Himachal Pradesh pharma clusters. Some more examples were hotlines. So some of the companies have developed a hotline which workers may call on, they may dial in and they keep it anonymous. Like Pradeepan was mentioning, there are also some systems which are led by women. So the women workforce, the women workers don't feel they don't feel any barriers when it comes to accessing grievances. So typically through some of these examples, I hope that you will take away a good idea of what a grievance redressal mechanism could look like. I am now looking at the question box since we are at the end of our. Sorry, my system is acting up.
Elenia, your screen is frozen, but I can still hear you. Oh,
Yeah.
a second here.
Yeah. Sorry about that. My system was acting up, but I have my tech team and Rishika here, so we're all sorted. So yeah, that was the end of our presentation, and I hope there was good takeaway, good amount of information to chew on. Maybe while I am looking at the Q&A box as well, still no questions. Can you? Okay, there are some. It is sort of well explained, though, throughout, and many of them may be involved in these kind of programs. Okay, I'm not sure if I understand that.
I think it's just about why there's maybe not so many questions.
Okay, there's a good question here. Maybe let's take this up. The question is, what are the key challenges organizations face when transitioning from a reactive to a preventive management approach, and how can they overcome them? Very good question. So, first, it's important to identify what are your priority areas. So, when we're looking at even preventive mechanisms, it's important to understand what are the type of complaints that are coming in, and accordingly develop your transition plan. And since we were talking about policy and process and some of the key factors when it comes to grievance redressal mechanisms, a robust policy, very important, processes, very clear processes, and third, having a budget, a budgetary allocation, and fourth, um, key resource persons. So you need to have very clearly identified who will take care of the complaints, what will the escalation process be, and also how can you maybe hold accountable the officials that are taking care of the grievance redressal mechanisms. And finally, capacity building and training, both of the officials that are taking care of the grievances and also of the stakeholders. So when I mean the officials, you need to keep continuously providing capacity building and training and awareness programs to your employees, to the management, to the committee, to the immediate supervisor, to ensure there's confidentiality, there is transparency, and that they're effectively handling complaints. But at the same time, also periodic awareness and capacity building programs for your stakeholders. So you have to do this for your workers. They need to know what the grievance redressal mechanism is. For contractual workers, for your consumers, and basically all the stakeholders that can access the grievance redressal platforms. Kathleen, I see your hand is up. Please.
Yeah, for this question towards the preventive grievance management, I do have an example from Siegwerk. So having a grievance mechanism, as mentioned, is reactive. If something really happens, then you get the note. How can you be preventive? And Siegwerk is having regular employee surveys, completely anonymous, online, but also based on paper, really throughout the global organization. It's quite a big thing. And people who have really a huge issue, they go to the grievance mechanism or report it. But sometimes there might be smaller things that are just annoying or something. And it does help to have these regular employee surveys to really pick up on tendencies. There's also asked how happy are you with your workplace, or asking different things. Are the training sufficient? Are the tools sufficient? How do you get along with your manager? And these are a preventive tool to get a little bit of a sense what is going on. And of course, what's the challenge? If you're picking something up, you really have to implement something. And of course, you have to dedicate people, time, and budget to these kinds of things, which is not always easy in the operational world.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, maybe one more example that we could give was we did a small project with Jindal Steel, and they told us all they started doing was with their contractual workers, they started doing chai pe charcha, which means chit chat while having tea. So the plant manager and one manager, which would basically rotate from different verticals, would have tea with the workers every once, I think, in a quarter on a Friday, and they would bring in some fun snacks and they would just talk. And one of the complaints that was raised was they didn't like the food in the canteen. But then they fixed that, and they saw that there were little things can make a difference where there was more satisfaction, and they felt heard. They felt like the company cares. So it does have a positive knock-on effect. Just listening. Okay, I think it's 3:55. No more questions, but perhaps we can move towards the closing then. We do have the next webinar scheduled on the 7th of November, and Kathleen will be sharing the invite for that. And it's way past the Diwali celebration, so I'm sure everybody will be back and energized and into the work mode, hoping to see more participation in the third webinar. Maybe before closing, Kathleen or Rishika, in case you guys would like to give any concluding remarks. Mhm.
Yeah, not many remarks from my side. Thank you very much for this deep dive. And thank you all for joining. It's really nice to see that many people joining, being interested. We will share the recording and the slides within the next week. And in case you have any questions, please feel free to just write a message and we'll get back to you.
Thank you everyone for joining this webinar, and we really look forward to you on November 7th for the next webinar on the topic of health, safety and environment. Till then, happy weekend.